What's going on, Illumineers, and welcome back to the madness. Before we get in today's video, I just want to start off with holy crap, thank you guys. You guys found a lot of, you guys really enjoyed part one, bunch of messages, bunch of comments asking for the further parts. So I'm gonna get these going for you guys. But with that being said, today's video is all about different deck types as well as tech options. SteelSong's in a really cool place. You know, last set we were kind of stuck with really kind of two versions, two win cons. We had flutes, and then later in the set, we had harps. And we saw some other things, like we saw some of us were running blues and some of us were running perditas, but for the most part, our win con was flutes and harps later on. And there wasn't really anything else. But with this set, we have a lot more options, and it's kind of made things a little bit more difficult for people because there's so many different directions you can take it. So this video is talking about those options, the pros and the cons, and then the end of it we'll jump into a couple different lists. And these lists, when you look at them, I want you to remember the tech options because some of them will show queen, but how you can just throw the Robin Hoods in place of the queens, the flutes instead of harps or instead of daisies, whatever it may be. So just remember the tech options first, and when you're looking at the list, and make it your own. Work with how you prefer and what your play style is. So with that, let's jump into the first part, which is daisies, flutes, nothing. And this actually might be we can do nothing. But we could probably just change this to lanterns and harps. All right. So as you can see, harps is pretty much already crossed out. Harps is still something you guys could use. It's still, when Wojciech first made harps a thing, go read his blog on why, but he likes to play with really low uninkable counts. So harps gave you a way to play with low uninkables and have something when you go whole new world, then you play the harps and you go wide. And it worked really well, and we saw it work very well. But one thing that's happened with this set is Pete. And right now, where Steel Song is so popular, and you're going to be facing a lot of mirrors, you're going to be facing a lot of Petes. And pretty much any steel deck is throwing in Pete's. So you have to understand that you could wheel and play, two, three, four harps, best case scenario, but they're only going to live for one turn if you're playing a steel deck because they probably wheel into a Pete. They see your harps and they go Pete. So you'll quest that one time, but then you lose that 1/4 body, and that really hurts. So you can still run harps because it is an inkable and you can still ink it early on. So it still is an option if you wanted to go that route. If you wanted to rely really hard on the whole new world, then you could even possibly go like three daisies to harp, something like that. So if you drew into a harp early on, then you can just ink the harp the same way that Wojciech discussed it earlier on. But harps for now, for the most part, are crossed out, but it is still a win con that you guys can use. So that leaves us with daisies, flutes, and lanterns. Um, People have been talking about daisies since the very beginning when they first got released, and I think people are slowly realizing that you play daisy the same way that you play harps. The only difference is you can't ink daisy. Um, Daisy's never going to be, even against red blue, it's never going to be a turn one play. It's just, it's not, because then you have this 1/4 that's just not protected against anything. So typically you want that turn one to be, the Robin Hood or the Cinderella, best case scenario, the Cinderella, and then you can go ahead and drop the Daisy the next turn. And let me even go back a second. You could go Daisy turn one as long as you have Vanessa turn two. The point is that you have to be able to protect your Daisy. And if you don't have a singer, either Cindy on turn one or Vanessa on turn two, then you're not going to be able to protect Daisy. And that's going to hurt. That's going to hurt really bad. So what you want to do the majority of the time is get your Daisy off of your whole new world. But Daisy's still really strong. The pros are that it's a 1/4 body that you don't, it's a harp that is uninkable, and it also helps them draw a card if it is a character. Okay, so that's really powerful. And against red purple, or these purple decks that are becoming more prevalent, they run a lot of characters. So statistically, they will see characters off of your Daisy. So you're giving them free ink, you're giving them options. So again, Daisy is not something you play early almost ever. It's something you will always, always, always mulligan. And in that 1% time, you might do it against red a blue deck, and the blue decks would either be green blue or blue red. And those are probably going to be the only times that you're ever going to want to play Daisy early on and not mulligan it. So the pros and cons, it's a wheel thing, right? You play wheel, you go wide, understand you are going to draw them cards, but if you do draw them cards and just play a wheel again, then it doesn't really matter. So just a strong body that quests for two, and that's really effective. Because next, if we look at our flute, the flute is the item that you every turn when you play a song once per turn, you can exert the flute and you gain one lore. So right there, you kind of see how Daisy's gaining you two lore per turn, but Flute's only gaining you one lore per turn. The reason I'm a huge flute believer, and I haven't been playing a lot of it yet because I've played so much flute, but the reason I'm a huge flute believer is because of the way it just feels so good into so many matchups. Now blue got a big helping hand with Cusco, but even when you see Cusco, that's not the end of the world because it goes to your inkwell. And SteelSong, you have to realize with SteelSong, you're not normally inking every single turn because you just don't have to. If you don't have a whole new world, then there's not really a good reason for you to ink every turn unless you can make that reason. But if you're just inking just to ink, then you're wasting resources when resources are so important for us. But Flute just offers that ability to start a race. If they don't have item removal, then they know they're now racing the Flute. The same way that if a purple deck techs in the spell book, they're now racing the spell book. Except for us, you're typically running four. So one, not so bad. Two, it's getting worse. Three, you're in deep trouble. You better have item removal or the race is just on and there's a good chance you're going to lose. Now, what's the major flaw in Flute? Well, one, it only quests for one, and two, it with Pete becoming so popular, like Harp, right? With Pete becoming so popular, there's going to be turns where you won't get to exert your flute, so you won't gain lore off of that. So that's something you have to keep in mind as well. So next we have our lanterns, and this is something we'll show again in DeCandio's build. The lanterns, the reason lanterns are a win con is they're not gaining you lore, but they're letting you cheat out characters. So if you can run high on inkables with lanterns because you don't need a lot of ink. Like running lanterns, you can play with 3 ink and be perfectly fine if you see the lanterns. And that's a win con because you're just constantly laying down characters. You're just constantly getting these threats down, the Cinderellas, Tinkerbells, Chin Pos, and you're able to cheat out all these characters to eventually just quest them to death. And that is why that is a win con. The positives are that you can cheat out really big characters or multiple characters in one turn. Some of the negatives are it doesn't matter if you can cheat out a bunch of characters if you don't see any characters. If you don't see a whole new world, then there's a good chance those lanterns are just they're good for nothing really, and so that can be an issue. But their early game, one of the things that Steel Songs always thrived at is explosiveness, and lanterns give you that. They let you have some really explosive turns. The last thing that I wanted to throw in here, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is Allanadale, and I haven't done a lot of playtesting yet with Allanadale, to be perfectly honest. I've done one game with him, and I won the game against Blue Red, but the thing about Allanadale is it's a 4 drop that inkable that quests for two and it's a 2/3. So there's a lot that can remove it, but at the same time, if you play Allanadale, you sing a song, you get one lore right off the bat. So it's like playing a flute. And then if they can't remove Allanadale the next turn, you can quest for two. And then if you sing another song or sing two more songs, then that Allanadale's now gotten you 4 or 5 lore. And that's a big deal. That can be a lot. So you could probably, if you wanted to, you could cut out some of these daisies if you wanted to go Allanadale and treat Allanadale almost like a harp and or a daisy in the sense that it's just a little bit more expensive, but it can also sing things like Zeus and your other four and below songs. So I think that is something that you could play with as well. And when we're looking at deck lists, consider how would I feel if I took out daisies for Allanadales? What would that look like to me? You just have to understand that you're playing a very different game if you run Allanadales versus daisies or harps, in the sense that Allanadale is going to be a more control style game because you can't drop, three Allanadales after a whole new world because, well, they're 4 ink each. So that is an option, though. I think that's a better option than probably harps, even. So the next one we have, though, that I want to talk about is Gaston versus Naveen. The reason I bring up Gaston versus Naveen is because they're doing the same thing, kind of. Yes and no. And what I mean by that is Gaston, how you're going to play Gaston is you play Gaston on turn 3, and then on turn 4, you play Ariel, so that whatever you do, whatever you pull off of Ariel, you're guaranteed to be able to sing it with Gaston. And Gaston's the 3/3, quest for 1, singer 5. So if, for example, turn 1 you go Cindy, turn 2 you go Ursula, turn 3 you go Gaston, at this point, unless the SteelSong mirror has seen a wheel or they've seen like every kill spell they have, there's no way they're going to be able to remove all three of those characters, being Cindy, Ursula, and Gaston. So on 4, you can go Ariel and get a whole new world, get a Zeus, whatever it may be, and you're guaranteed to be able to sing that. And that can be a great way to come back into a mirror match. So that's what I mean when I say it's kind of filling the same niche role that Naveen is filling, and it's an inkable. So now if we look at Naveen, he's a 3/3 quest for 2. When you play him, you can sing. He's a singer 6, but he is uninkable and costs 4. And Naveen is kind of doing the same thing in that if you're running, for example, the Lanterns build, and we've talked about this, Naveen, if you play Lantern on 2, is like a second shift line. But Naveen also has more utility late game because Naveen, you can top deck and then play any song that's in your hand. And that's massive. Worst case scenario, Naveen's a 3/3 that quests for 2. Like, so you play him dry, you do nothing, but then you quest for 2 the next turn. And that has utility and power. So again, it's, do you want a card that does nothing when it comes down, or do you want a card that does something when it comes down? And how do you feel about higher uninkable counts versus lower uninkable counts? Because Gaston, you will most likely run a deck with lower uninkable counts. But we will look at a list that is running Gaston's over Naveen's, so stick around for that. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is pretty big deal, is shift lines. And the big shift lines to talk about and discuss are the Robin Hood shift line versus the Queen shift line. Now, there is one more shift line that people don't talk about very often that is a possibility if Blue Steel ever really takes off and gets any legs. And that's going to be the Mickey Mouse shift line. So we'll mention that really quick, in that the reason the Mickey Mouse shift line has a place to potentially take off is because the 1-drop is the Mickey Mouse that has resist 1. So that means that Blue Steel can no longer fire the cannons on your shift line and take it out. They have to put more than just one fire the cannons into your shift line. And that's really, really powerful, because if you can't get your shift line against Blue Steel, you're going to be in a really rough spot. But right now, we don't really have to worry about that. And the only time Mickey Mouse shift line would be something that I would consider running is if Blue Steel ever got to a point where it was competitive and top tier and being able to do, and you see a lot of it. But right now, it's really between Robin Hood and Queen. And you kind of see the big things here. Robin Hood draws a card. It doesn't draws a card when it's banished in a challenge. It doesn't die to any removal spell that I can think of off the top of my head. Like it requires more than just one thing. It requires ice blocks in Sizu. Um, it requires Medusa, which is not a removal spell, but a character. But Medusa can take care of it. It requires ice blocks and Brawl. It requires the Zeus and a whole let the Storm Rage on. The point is that there's no singular spell that can remove it, except for something like You're Welcome or Let It Go. Now, if they let it go, that they can let it go Queen and Robin Hood. So it's kind of the same with You're Welcome. So as far as that goes, though, that 6 health is a lot. They can't Zeus it. They can't Strength of a Raging Fire. Like that represents a lot. It gains 2 lore when it challenges something, and the biggest reason that I love Robin Hood is that it makes for an easy Rapunzel target. Like your opponent can't afford to quest with anything because that gives you the opportunity to attack into it and play Rapunzel to heal. Because there's not a lot of characters in the game that can deal 6 damage. So you're free to hit in anything you want and then bam, heal. And then if you're really lucky, you can gain 2 lore off of it and you get to heal with your Rapunzel. So in that is huge. You could take away the 2 lore piece, and Robin Hood would still be just as expensive and just as powerful as he is. Now, Queen, though, in my opinion, there's not a single start in the game that is more explosive than a Queen on turn 2. There's nothing that any deck can do that changes the course of the game more than a Queen that sings Whole New World on turn 2. And the reason I say that, and I'll stand by that, is because the mulligan is just so powerful in Lorcana. So your ability to just play Queen on turn 2, you've now gotten rid of, you've inked twice, you've played a shift target, and you've played Whole New World. So like you get a whole new hand, and your opponent that may have only played 2 cards at this point, and if they're lucky 2 cards, now they're stuck with a hand that could be all on inkables. Like if you're playing red blue, that's a really bad day for them because they run so many high on inkables. Now, the other piece is World's Greatest Criminal Mind shenanigans. You can go in, if they have 2 characters on the board, you can give -4 to one and +4 to the other and kill it. That can be a way that you can remove Mufasas, Flavershams, pretty much any card as long as they have 2 characters on their side of the field. But it also lets you kind of turn even your smallest card, your Cinderella, into something that can trade because now your Cinderella becomes a 5/2 hitting into something that most likely has 0 attack. And that's pretty powerful on its own as well. Um, the other thing is that it can't be Medusa, right? It's really hard to brawl it. It's really hard to Medusa it. It's really hard to Sizu it because all those things are going to require ice blocks. And you have to be running blue-red to be able to play the ice blocks. But, both of them have their negatives, right? Robin Hood's taken out by Medusa. It's easier to ice block, remove it. And then Queen, of course, um, can be taken out by any number of spells, so it's really easy to remove that way. They can trade Fox into it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because they also lose their Fox, whereas if they traded Fox into Robin Hood, they don't lose the Fox. They have to have 2 more damage somewhere else, but they still don't lose their Fox. So it's really just a trade-off between something that's very multifunctional in the sense of playing safe versus Queen, which you're going super explosive. You've lit some dynamite, you've blown things up, you're doing explosive things, and that's what Queen's representing is that ability to just be explosive like that. And then of course there's Mickey Mouse as well. So those are the 2 big shift lines, though, and you're not right or wrong with either one. There's arguments to both, and you just need to figure out which one fits your playstyle better. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into a couple deck lists. Now, we'll pull those up, not this, because I have them right here. So the first one I want to pull up is one that, don't pay attention to the names. I kind of just name them whatever I feel like. This is more of your your normal kind of SteelSong list. There's nothing special about it. We're running 3 daisies. Now, remember when you look at these, if you want to replace Robin Hood, then replace Robin Hood. If you want to replace Daisy, then replace Daisy. Put in Flutes, um put in Allanadales, put in the Queen for the shift line. Now, some of these like this list might not work out, like lanterns might not be as good, but you could still swap out the daisies for the lanterns, and it's still going to be a powerful deck. So the big thing here, what are we looking at with something like this? You got your Prince Naveens and your Pete's for the mirror match, for the explosiveness of not letting them sing on turn 3 when you play Pete, which would be their turn 4, or their turn 3 if you're on the play. Um, I'm still a fan of Bare Necessities, and most likely, if I was to take this to a tournament today, I would probably drop the 2 World's Greatest Criminal Minds for 2 Bare Necessities if I was going in blind, like completely blind, just because Bare Necessities is again just a really, really strong card in the mirror. If you play Cindy on 1 and you're on the play and you sing Bare Necessities with Cindy because they played maybe a Robin Hood, well, now, actually, I wouldn't do that if they played a Robin Hood. But if they played nothing because they didn't get a 1 drop, then you can sing Bare Necessities to take out a song that they really needed, whatever it may be. So that's power right there as well. Now, the argument to run World's Greatest Criminal Mind, if you wanted to play more safe, is to take out Cinderella's for free. But also, if you were running Queen, then you might be better off going 3 World's Greatest Criminal Minds and no Bare Necessities, because then you can run Queen, and that gives you the ability to have removal in World's Greatest Criminal Mind. You still got the idea of go whole new world, flood the board with daisies, piglets, smees, things like that. And also, if you wanted, you could cut like 1 Naveen and you could go for a 4th Smee. That would reduce your uninkable count. I'm still not 100% sold that you have to use 4 Naveens. It's still something that I'm just playtesting right now to see how much weight it holds. Um, Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it feels bad, but it's something that I will let you guys know where I end up sitting before set champs. But I do believe I am between 3 and 4 right now, just where I will let you all know. But this is just a reliable list that kind of just does its thing. Like I said, you could swap out daisies for flutes, you could swap out Robin Hoods for queens. If you did that, though, I would cut the bare necessities for a third World's Greatest Criminal Mind. If I stuck with Robin Hood's, probably cut the 2 World's Greatest for 2 more bare necessities, or 1 bare necessities and 1 Smee. Um, the next list that we wanted to look at, and while I pull that up, is again just showing off DeCandio's list, showing off the Lantern WinCon. I won't talk too much about this one because we've already talked about it quite a bit. Um, One thing I did want to highlight though with this is lanterns. The nice thing about lanterns is it lets you play big characters for lesser ink. Um, and so why I want to highlight that is that there would be no if you didn't like Cinderella, you could cut the 3 Cinderellas and play 3 Tinkerbells. If you were really worried about green yellow, then maybe you cut the Cinderellas and you play the Tinkerbells for that reason. And you could do that because of what lanterns have. And you could go a more character based deck, and we'll kind of show that off in a little bit. But and because of what lanterns gives you. So the Cinderella doesn't have to be Cinderella. You could swap that out for the Tinkerbell if you wanted, and do something like that because Tinkerbell is just a powerful card as well. But this is just DeCandio's song from the other day. The other list that I wanted to highlight, this is pretty much what I ran for set 4 and something that I still think can work today. It still has the 4 flutes, it still has the 3 blues, except we have the 4 Petes in here. And before, the 4 Petes were for Lawrence's. And I still like this list because it's red purple is getting more and more popular. And a list like this is pretty much a buy against red purple because they still don't have item removal. They still, if they B prep us, we don't care because of Baloo. if you see one whole new world, that's pretty much game, and you've won that match, and you're moving on to game two. So it's just a strong list that worked in set four that I do still believe can be set five. And if you didn't like the flutes, swap it out, throw in daisies, and you can do the same thing. Um, a lot of people have been asking about no shift line at all, and I personally don't like this route. I think what shift lines give us as far as explosiveness is too good to ignore. But this is kind of something that I tried to throw together for people, and it does have merit. You got your daisies for your whole new world, Naveen to sing whole new world. I want to try um, when will my life begin? It lets you draw a card and your opponent can't challenge, so that can be pretty powerful. I've always been a big fan of Chinpo, and I try and fit him in any deck when the time allows, when the deck allows, just because he's a 4/7 bodyguard. For purple, they have to like throw a fox and a goat into that, and that's just a lot. Same with Cinderella. So Lawrence's, of course, are MVPs that I also try and throw in any deck that I can because he's a 4/4 that quests for two. Like that's just really powerful. So this is just if you don't like shift lines in general, I think this is something you could run, and maybe I'll try it tonight actually at leagues just to see how it flows. But I did cut down one like the Storm Rage on because of uninkable counts, but because we're throwing in Naveen or Baloo's. But I think this could also be a pretty powerful list as well. The last one I wanted to highlight. So this is pretty much what Wochuk used last set. And the only difference is that these daisies were harps, of course. And then we have the Pete's in here. And I think last set he was using Lawrence's. And then I also threw, like I said, I really like Chinpo's. So I threw Chinpo in here as well, just for more big characters. And the idea here is we have the Gaston. So, like I said, you go one Cindy, two Smee or Ursula, three Gaston, four Ariel. And then maybe you sing a whole new world. You go wide with Daisies and Pete, that kind of thing. And of course, you just have Chinpo's because you can play Chinpo to protect your Daisies, to protect your Smees, whatever it may be. So, just, I'm a really big believer in Chinpo. I really like that card. Um, the last thing that I wanted to highlight, or nope, I have two more that I wanted to highlight. This is something I've been playing around with. I don't think this is competitive by any means, so please don't take this to competitive day and think that it. Who knows? Maybe it is. But this is just a no wheel song or no wheel deck that I've been messing around with. The idea is that you have Cinderella, Tinkerbell, the family to keep drawing cards. Of course, Rapunzel, and then Blast from the Past. So if they be prepped, a bunch of Tinkerbells, then you blast from the past with Naveen, and you can put all those Tinkerbells back into your hand. So that can have a powerful play as well. And that's something to not be ignored for sure. So you could just hit them with some spice and maybe surprise them. You got the lanterns to kind of cheat out these big characters still. So just powerful stuff happening here as well. And the last one I wanted to highlight is Perdita's Song. This was ran by Chris at one of the DLCs. Personally, not a fan of Perdita. I'll just put it out there right now. Like, you won't see me running it. I don't like running such a high uninkable card. Not when we're running wheel and I can't get rid of it, things like that. But you saw that it can work as well. Now, to make Perdita work, we had to cut Naveen's because our uninkable count that was getting so high. So that can be a little rough into the mirror. But as long as you keep that Pete for turn three, and that gives you the chance to go Ursula, Pete, get the board back. And then, of course, late game, you're going to have things like Perditas. Now, one thing with this build is a better option might be to cut the bare necessities for World's Greatest Criminal Mind for the mirror because you can answer their Cinderellas in late game. So that could be an option as well. But that's kind of that's kind of look at a bunch of different builds. And I know it was pretty fast. So I hope that's all right. I didn't want this video to go super long, and with that being said, I hope that this kind of opened your guys' eyes into some tech options. I wasn't sure how to put this together. I was going to do two videos, but I think one video is long enough that kind of talks about it. Um, the big thing that I want you to remember and take from this video is that all of these steel song lists have the same core cards. It's a lot like blue steel. Like all of the lists have the same core cards, and then you have to choose what kind of win style you want to have. You have to choose what kind of play style you're going to have. If you like a more controlled approach to the game, then maybe flutes and lanterns and or Allen are going to be your route. If you want a gameplay where you don't have to worry about B preps, then maybe flutes is the route that you take and you don't have to worry about your characters being removed because flutes are kind of that fail safe against it. How do you want your playstyle to be? That's what it comes down to. And then how comfortable are you with really high on inkables? Because if you're running things like flutes, lanterns, Naveens, you're going to have a lot higher on inkables than if you're running things like Allen and Gaston, or just even Gastons in place of Naveens, your on inkables are going to be lower. So those are the questions you have to ask yourself. Do you want something that's very consistent, or do you want that explosive turn or the potential for the explosive turn that might just win you the game on turn two? Like, these are the questions. Like, if you're playing green yellow and you can go whole new world on turn two, you probably win that game because you're able to just do so much right there in that one turn. So remember, when you look at these lists, all these lists are going to be on my Discord. I'll try to put the links to Dreamborn in the description as well, or the comments. And if you guys have any questions at all, be sure to put them in the comments. If you guys look at my other videos, I try to respond to every single person. If you want to have more in-depth conversations, hit me up on Discord. That will be in the description as well. Guys, I really appreciate you so much. If you liked the video, please like, please subscribe. Part 3 and onward, I believe, will be looks at gameplay itself into the different types. We'll probably start with red purple because that is, a pretty popular list that you're going to see a lot of. But yeah, guys, I appreciate it, and we'll sign off as we always do. Remember, the goal of my channel, the goal of my stream is always happy and healthy. Whatever healthy looks like for you, as long as you're pursuing that. Science has proven that the two words go together, okay? As long as we are happy, as long as we are healthy and happy, then we get to keep doing things like play Lorcana and chill and have set champs and enjoy the life that we want to enjoy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you around, and I hope I see you in the next video. Until next time, I'm out.